Okay, guys, so unfortunately, I have some bad news. Due to some sort of file corruption that I haven't really been able to get to the source of, I unfortunately lost a lot of the effects and filters that I used on these sound effects, which means that I won't be able to do as detailed of a breakdown as I would have hoped to do. However, this is an educational channel and we can turn this into a learning moment. Do backups. With that out of the way, let's have a look at some of the sounds and see how I made them. So first up on my list is the Atmos sound I used. This was actually fairly simple. So this Atmos sound was the sound of me blowing into the microphone. Thusly. So I took that sound effect, which I recorded over a bunch of times. I applied a blur filter to it, which softens it up and makes it sound a lot more outsidey. Then I laid that through in my timeline and created a bunch of double tracks and panned them left and right. Now to get from there to the final sound, I added a very fast flanger with an LFO on the feedback level, so the feedback would rise up and down, and that's where that pulsating sound comes from. I also added some chorus sound effects and some EQs. Unfortunately, I can't show you the details of those. Next up on our list, we have the mouth foliage, which is the sound of me rubbing my hands through the alien grass, along with the sound of me rustling through the trees right before that. So this FX chain was recovered, so I'm able to do a bit more of a detailed breakdown on it. So the initial sound sounded like this. It was just me making various shushy noises into the microphone. So the first thing I did with that was I ran it through a filter called Wider. It's just a free plugin that adds some very subtle stereo depth to whatever sound you're working with. I use it a fair bit. It sounds quite nice. Then I added a magic plugin called Double Talk. It's this kind of obscure free plugin that I found a few months ago that has a whole bunch of really, really crazy filters and effects, and that's what's carrying most of this sound. We can A and B it with and without the filter on. It has a bunch of really crazy resampling, smearing, and chorus effects built in, and it's a completely free plugin. I'm really lucky to have found it because it's saved me a lot. And then from there, it was just a simple EQ and some reverb. So the next sounds are me clicking off and removing the helmet in the opening scenes. So this was just a combination of two main noises, the suck in to latch it off, and the click to take it back off. So for the latching off, I used that Double Talk plugin again. It's really good at making everything you put into it sound abstract. I cannot stress this enough. It's an amazing plugin. And then for the actual opening of the helmet, it was just a simple EQ with a sort of notch filter that came down as the sound went on. So next up we have the sounds for the mystery rock that my character grabs. So that's split into two main sounds. The first sound is the super high pitch sound, which I created by taking a very short snippet of my voice and loading it into FL Studio's sort of default synth, which is called 3x oscillator. It allows you to load in clips of audio as wavetables. So that's essentially what I did with my voice. I loaded it in as a wavetable sort of sound. And then from there you can get really artifacty with it. So the higher you go, the more you get really glitchy bounce back frequencies. So what I did was I took that synth sampler of my voice that was loaded into here and just pitched it up until it became completely indistinguishable. And then from there I added some slight detuning. And then I ran the whole thing through a guitar amp plugin called Hardcore. The other part of the sound I did using a synth called Harmor. One of its specialties is it allows you to load in audio files and convert them into raw harmonic data. So you can control the individual harmonics of each sound as they're being synthesized by Harmor. It allows a whole bunch of really cool pitch molding techniques, but I used it fairly simply here. So what happened was I had a snippet of my voice just going VV. I took that and played around with the timing a little bit. And then I pitched it down. And brought the filter down. Then from there, I just added a chorus and some bit crushing distortion built into Harmor, and it started to come into its own once I pitched it down even further. Then from there, I just added a subtle EQ to boost the artifacts of the high ends a little bit. So next up, let's take a look at one of the fun ones. We had the sound of plucking the leaf from the tree right near the start. The initial sound for this one was literally just me doing this. So I loaded that onto the timeline and pitched it down a fair bit. Then from there, I added a heavy amount of reverb, a little bit of chorusing, some light compression distortion, and a flanger that was gradually mixed in over time, so it would mainly affect the reverb tail. And to bring the frequencies of that up, I used an EQ to really boost those high ends. Then I just added some pretty heavy compression to bring out the tail even more. Okay, so next we have some of the rumbles and the impact sounds, which I'm quite proud of. So these were, again, just me blowing into the microphone. I trimmed them so they'd sort of cut in halfway through the sound so we get more of that sort of transient sound. And then from there, it was just reverb distortion and some use of EQ to scoop out the mids and boost the highs. So then we have some more layer sounds for the sound of the rocket ship crashing into the planet right near the start. So the raw sounds for that were split into a couple different layers. So the first one was just this. The second sound was this noise, which I stretched out a little bit to fit the rest of the scene. And then a big boom sound. So it was just a case of dousing the whole thing in volume automation, reverb, and a really big flanger right at the end, which you can really hear the tail of in the final stems. Next up, we have the sound of the lovely chirping orb at the end. This one involved a little bit of voice acting on my part, which is always fun. So the raw sounds for that is just a single track of me just vocalizing. I added a free pitch shifter called Graylon. I don't know why I did this rather than just pitch up the audio files themselves, but you know. Then from there, I added a free ring modulator called MDA Ring Mod. And then I added a distortion followed by an EQ. And this was so that I could open up the EQ when the orb gets angry right at the end and have it come up in intensity. And then it was just some light reverb to finish it off. Finally, we have the growling sound of the orb, which I'm quite happy with. So initially that sounded like this. I just took that sound and pitched it down. So then I added some distortion to it, along with a light high pass and some more aftermarket pitch shifting. Then I mixed in a slight ring mod. Then from there, it was just some EQ, reverb, and compression. So yeah, that's a wrap on the sound design. I'm very sorry about the technical issues that prevented me from going in depth with some of these sounds. I know that's frustrating. It's frustrating for me as well. But as I said before, it's a learning moment. Back up your files.
All right, so here we have the project I used to do this. I broke it down into different sections according to the time frame when different things happen. What I did here is I sampled myself. I just tried to do random sounds so that I could manipulate and chop them up.
Hey. Whoop. Oh. Ooh. Love. Wow, wow. Shh.
I tried to make the weirdest sounds I could possibly make. All right, for this first section, let's take a look at the main elements. I started out with a noise that I call trippy noise. I tried to make something a bit organic that reminds us of this alien planet where our main character is crashing on, basically. The way I made this is using Serum. What I did is I put one of the sample from my voice inside the noise oscillator here. What you can do is you can actually upload samples and have it here. What I basically did is I modulated the pitch value of this sample. So when I just press a key, you can see that the pitch is going up and down quite fast. By just doing that and automating an auto filter over it, it gave all that movement. So this is sweeping through the frequencies by removing all the frequencies in the middle here. So it's allowing different frequencies to take over the sound throughout different moments. I have one called machine noise. Again, that's another sample. It's actually just the one sample transposed down a few octaves. Having it on E0 is really making it quite low and transposing all those frequencies down. The second lead I have here is a bit more playful. We have another instance of Serum. That's actually the same sample as the machine noise you just heard. We are using a formant filter. I'm putting this LFO in one bar and affecting the formant value of this filter. So the formant is like how much the formant filter is shaping the sample from the noise oscillator. And as you can see, I activated it so that it affects that value. And as we go through the LFO, we're sweeping from the beginning of the range to the end of the range values. I also put a reverb on it, cut the low frequencies, boosted the highs, and I put a little filter just to cut off some of those high frequencies. I thought it was a bit too much. I added a filter delay, which I thought really gives it a wider feel as well. I have some automations here with the filter just to allow one section to flow into the other. I also have a little pad here. This is more like a little background thing going with the other pads I have here. Together it creates this sort of atmosphere that I thought was really cool. This first pad is using a sample again. Literally just put the sample and put a dimension and a reverb on it to really give that atmospherical vibe to it. This pad looks a bit more complex, but it's one of the samples. I just chopped it up, put it in here. Basically put a long reverb on it. So this is set to 24 seconds. It's after an erosion. So let's hear it with that. This is also transposed down quite heavily, so that's why it's giving that deeper vibe. The words I was pronouncing at the beginning were, normal and quite high, but I guess transposing down those samples really gives new textures and new sounds that we couldn't have thought about otherwise. So the erosion really gives it more a bit more grindiness, and when you merge that with the reverb, it's almost as if all the grindy parts of this sound are like flowing more. I'm sure you get what I mean. Okay, next up we have all the percussions. All those hats are literally the same sample as the one I showed you before. I chopped up different sections of it and added some overdrive to it. I also set the release, decay and sustain so that I have a quicker sound on every note. This hat isn't cut as intensely as this one. It's allowing a bit more attack to come in, and I think that's merging well with the other ones. I cut the low frequencies and the mid frequencies as well of that sample, so we could just have the frequencies that are usually there on a normal hat, and the overdrive as well. It's allowing all those frequencies at the top to kind of merge together. This one here is the same, but it's almost like a longer hat because I retained more of the sample in it. This trippy perk here is using that weird mouth noise I made at the end of the vocal recordings I did previously. So I just kept that part, and what I did was I put a vocoder. The vocoder here, as you can see, it's just set on noise, so it's putting white noise with the original sample. So the original sample sounds like this, but when you put a vocoder on it, it gives a new texture and a new vibe to this sound, which I felt was a bit alien-y and was matching quite well with the other percussions. Now to the main lead of this song. Here again, that's the same little sample here. I merged this into two different sections, basically everything, while I have an extra top layer, which I find just gives a brightness to the vocals. So this is done with the same sample again. The top layer here, I chopped up the beginning of it, but this one is just the full sample, and it's pitched up a lot. So this is 1 octave higher than what it was before. I've put a multi-band dynamics. I'm expanding the higher frequencies, stretching them out, whereas the mid frequencies, I'm limiting them. Cut some of the low frequencies here. I added a reverb. There's always an automation going on to really bring each element smoothly into each other. The top layer here is the same thing, but I turned off the multiband and I just cut off more of the mids here to just have that top layer merged with the other layer I had here. All right, next up, you're probably wondering how the hell did I make a kick and bass using my voice? Well, trust me, it was quite hard. The bass here is in 2 layers, the mid layer and the sub layer. As you can see, the EQ here is different, but it's again the same one sample. I almost did this whole song using one sample of my voice, but you guys can do it how you want. So the bass here, so what I did here is I cut the sample so that the initial point of the sample would start on the line. So this is allowing the phase to be together with both layers of the bass and with the kick that I'm going to show you in a sec. So here I literally cut the low frequencies and the really high frequencies so that I could basically like glue it together with a sub layer of the same thing. pretty damn strong. What I do is I have this thing called New York compression, which is a way to do parallel compression. I guess you could call this an audio effect rack. It's free, you can download it, and I usually use this for everything where I want an extra layer of compression. So if I want something to stand out more, I'll basically just add a bigger percentage of the New York compression, or also known as the parallel compression, onto those elements. So if we just had the bass without, with it, it's gonna cut through the mix better and be heard better. I grouped the sub and the bass together, and I put this drum bus. This is important because I'm pushing the transients so that basically the bass doesn't have such a long attack on each note, and it's coming in faster. And this is really important if you want to mix the kick with it. So let's take a look at the kick. Basically a little sample that I chopped up. As you can see here, the decay is really short, and that's allowing this noise to really act as the top of our kick. I didn't need the sub here because on this kick here, I am keeping everything below 250 and trying to really merge the two together into something that sounds like a kick. For the sub, I'm not using the classic sampling method. I'm using the slice option here. It's only taking this instance of the sample, and I felt like it was really clean the way it did it. It's merging with the top of our kick really well. Next up, we have more of the details that I put in the track. This is just a little sample that I chopped up and I put Redux on it. So Redux is just my best friend for making things tougher. It's a lot grindier, and I feel like it just helps sounds sound tougher and more present in the mix. There's two layers because one has a wider plugin on it. It's allowing both the first noise to be more mono and the other one to be more spread. That same sample here, as you can see, I did good old reverb tail technique. So I just put the reverb here, put a long decay reverb on it. I froze that and I turned it into an audio sample. So this here is the exact same thing as here, except I cut it short and I reversed it, made it bigger like this. This is another noise I made. Again, it's just a little tiny sample being looped onto itself. Our last lead here is made again with Serum. Pretty cool noise. It's another sample that I put in there. And what I did is have the pitch value move together with the cutoff and an LFO. The pitch value is moving a little bit, and then here the cutoff having the envelope affecting the range value of it. It's merging together so well, honestly. I put a dimension to widen it up, some distortion, a compressor, I cut off the lows as well on the EQ, and I just put another filter allowing less of the high frequencies from being there. I find that sometimes it kind of cleans up those harsher, higher frequencies. But that's basically it. I'm just really happy about the way it's sounding.
Once I got the stems for the music and sound design, I imported them into Ableton and started editing. Put some fades, I organized the music to its own group and the sound design to another group. So it's similar to busing the tracks, just to make sure the volume of each section is correct. While importing the stems, when I was listening to the mix for the first time, it didn't really feel like a normal scene. It felt more like a music video. So I started by making sure all the sound design material fed into the music really well. So this means tuning the sounds, like this pop. There was some other note when I started with. So you can see on the transposition modulation, I've tuned it down 9 semitones down from the original. And that was the root note of this song. So it molds into the music a bit better. So at the start, Griff gave me this one long sample to accompany the plane falling down, and I chopped them up into 3 different sections, with the first one being as if you're hearing it from where the camera is. Then this shot changes to a point of view shot from the ship falling, so I made sure the sound was changed so that it sounds like as if you're in the ship when it's falling. Then it goes back to the exterior sound. So I've grouped them together and they sound like this. So I layered that with a really compressed rumble, and it has that really heavy sound as if you're sitting in the airplane, with the engine sound really loud, but the plane walls being like a filter cutting off all the windy sound. So that's the rumble that's laid on top. So I laid another sample that was reused from this, and I pitched it up, made it faster, and made it as if it's like an alarm ringing tone from the pilot's cockpit or whatever, like an alarm tone, just to add that extra hectic feel. Next is the mask reveal, and thanks to Julien's pot lid, I use that as a trigger to bring all the high frequency content, as if this person that's landed on this planet could only hear the muffle sound in his suit. So when he takes off the mask, he can hear the real world. So that meant taking out all the high frequency content in the music as well. So at that point when the high frequency content comes in, and that helps to mold the sound design and music together much more in sync. Next, I played with the panning of all the samples. Instead of using the pan option on Ableton, I found this awesome Ambio Orbit plugin made by Sennheiser. And you can see that you can pan from front, right, left to back, and a elevation, so top to bottom pan. The top to bottom pan isn't that effective, but the side panning is actually really effective. So you can see when the spaceship is falling, so let's track that. So you can see that the automation is following the plane. So I applied the Ambio plugin to the chirpy sound at the end, and similar to the spaceship falling, I followed the movement of the person. So it's slightly to the right when he's walking in. And this spike is when he falls, and the actual placement of the orb is on his right side, so the sound shifts. Once again, I use the panning on the rumbles, and it is definitely more directional than using a normal pan. You can see in the shot, he flinches towards his right, then towards his left. So I made sure that the sound was coming from the right first, and then the second, and then the third one being a bit more distant to the right. Some other places in the music, I cut out certain elements because there was too much low end in there already, so I felt like there was too much. And I also took some of the subs out because I felt like when the mask comes off, it hits harder. So basically just saving that. There was this super awesome growling noise as well. The sample finished a bit too short, so I added some echo, this Valhalla frequency echo that's free. And yeah, just made the sample last a bit longer. And that's about it for this clip. Ultimately, I just made sure that the sound design and music felt like it was coming from the same spot. So making sure all the samples were pitched, especially to the key of the music, and rhythmically it was molded together.
So thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you guys next week for another episode.
So thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one.